Okay, actually, now would be a good time to. Lindsay's in the background writing me messages on a whiteboard, and one of the things that she is communicating to me is that I should ask what other webinar tactics y'all might want for the future. We don't have any specific plans to do more webinars right now, but we've really, it's just been super fun for us doing this. And so if there are things that you would, that you're like, oh, I'd sign up for that, or that would be an interesting thing to learn about, let us know, and we'll take it into consideration, and maybe we'll do some more of these things. We'll definitely not next week. we've pounded 4 of these things out in the past 4 weeks, and I think we're about ready for a little bit of a rest. But these are super, super fun. So if there are other topics that you guys would want, just type those into the chat window. And it doesn't have to be right this second. If something occurs to you halfway through the webinar tonight or after the fact, of course you can email us. But anytime you can type stuff into the chat window, questions, clarifications, stuff like that too. Not just suggestions for future webinars. Yeah. Okay. And Brittany, I'm seeing your message. It really was that long ago. It was May of almost 2 years ago now that we did that workshop, it was so fun. I want to do one of those again. BN, hi. Good to have you with us. I'm sorry that I don't know more of your name to say, and it's perfectly fine if all we have is BN. But y'all, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. In part just because some of this is intro stuff, and we'll let other people trickle in if they need to. Okay, so some of y'all are probably going to be tired of hearing me say this and introducing myself, but my name is Calvin Armerding. I am a senior associate here at Travelers Rest Counseling Associates in Travelers Rest, South Carolina. I'm a licensed professional counselor in the state of South Carolina, and I've been in private practice since 2017, something like that. I should probably figure that out. Private practice since 2017. Worked for the Department of Mental Health for a few years before that. Did some in-home, intensive in-home therapy for low-income population here in South Carolina for a while, and then also worked in an inpatient hospital in Colorado for a while after getting my master's degree. So a whole bunch of different kinds of work, but mostly what I do now is I work with young adults and couples, and I also do some parent coaching. We'll actually talk a little bit about parent coaching a little bit later on, but that's just a little bit about me. This is the last webinar in our April webinar series. This has just been a way for us to do something a little bit non-traditional and creative in this really strange time, and also allow us to maybe get some information out there, just adding some insights from things that we've learned and that we use in our clinical practice for you guys in this really strange time. So we did one on coronavirus as an exogenous factor, seeing it as that's really hard to say, as an exogenous factor. That was our first webinar. And now, of course, we're doing this one on mitigating anxiety from a pandemic. By the way, real quick on this, we are going to, after this webinar series is concluded, I'll be trimming off all the fat, all the awkward parts of me talking at the screen as we're waiting for things to start. But all the meaty content of these webinars, we're going to post these online, and so they'll be available to the general public. Of course, you can't get CE credit just for like you guys can, because we have this interaction now, but they'll be available to the general public. And so, of course, you guys can go back and watch these, and you can pass them on to other colleagues if you feel like they would be helpful, and even to clients, if anything in these webinars would be helpful for them. Of course, that would be more than happy for you to share these things. So here's what we're talking about tonight. We're talking about mitigating anxiety during a pandemic. And I want to be super clear about the importance of the word mitigating. Obviously, this is the premise that we're going to work from. Anxiety is our threat detection emotion. Okay, it's an emotion that energizes us to pay attention to our environment, to locate and neutralize threats. And it's an adaptive emotion. It's a really good emotion for us to have. Of course, super unpleasant, and it can get out of hand, but it's really, really good that we have the emotion of anxiety. Now, why it's important that we're using the term mitigating is because right now we do have a very present, very real, and very scary threat. It's everywhere, and it's in Greenville County, and I'm sure it's in Jamaica and in the UK, and all these places. We're all coming together from all over the place, and this is a present threat for all of us. And to varying degrees, it's probably more present in a place like Brooklyn than it is in Pickens, South Carolina, but it's present. And so we don't want to go about the business of just plummeting people's anxiety to zero. This is a really bad idea during a pandemic, and also really it's a bad idea in general to do that. If you guys remember, maybe from undergrad or from graduate school, there's a classic experiment that two researchers named Yerkes and Dodson did, and I'm going to draw this out on my pad here. We're going to see how it shows up on the screen. But if you can just imagine, okay, on one axis, okay, our y-axis here, this is our dependent variable. We're going to measure performance on a task. So maybe a maze or a little math test or word problem, something like this. Okay, and then on our independent axis, the things that we can control or measure more directly, we're going to measure anxiety, or this is what Yerkes and Dodson did. And what they found is that you tend to get this very interesting curve like this, kind of an inverse U, okay? And so what they found is that as anxiety increases, initially you get this real uptick in performance. Things tend to go a lot better. And then, of course, you get about to here, and then you start getting panicky and sweaty, and you can't think straight. And then down here, of course, you're having a panic attack, and you're not going to do very well solving a maze if you're having a panic attack, right? And so, a lot of times we really need to. This is something that we do need to pass on to our clientele when they come in. They say, "Oh, I've got all this anxiety." The first thing really that we need to let them know, and of course not in an unempathetic way or a dismissive way, but we do need to let them know that they really do need anxiety, because the world is not a safe place. There are threats that are there, and they need to have an emotional state that allows them to prepare, to prepare for and identify threats out in their environment, and that's anxiety. So here's the deal. We've got a very unique, very present, very real, pretty scary threat. I mean, it's killing people, okay? So we want to mitigate anxiety. We do not want to do away with anxiety. We do not want people to be zenned out, not worried about anything, just chill. We don't want them like that. This is not a healthy thing to be in our current state. That being said, of course, we also don't want people freaking out and paralyzed by their anxiety. And so there's this nice middle ground that we need to find. And we thought that it might be a good thing for us just to sit down as clinicians and really have, I'm going to give you all some information, but then we can have this be as conversational as possible. Have a little bit of a conversation about what that sweet spot looks like. What are the dynamics of that sweet spot? How do we get people out of the edges here and into a place where they're really going to be helped? Now, we're going to be approaching this question from an Adlerian lens, or through an Adlerian lens, and that's because I can't do anything else. It's just my training. I am not interested in proselytizing Adler or preaching the gospel, winning converts for Adler. That's not what I'm about. This is just some unique insights that we've gotten from the training that we've received that, of course, we just want to pass along to you guys because they've been super helpful to us. Okay, so enough of an intro. So here's kind of a metaphor that I want us to work with tonight, okay? So I have two kids, and let's talk about my son. Okay, my son, he's 4.5. My daughter's 2.5, and they love to play together. But because they're 4.5 and 2.5, they have not yet quite figured out how to play in such a way that they don't get hurt constantly. They run around and they fall down and they run into each other and they bonk heads and all of these things. And so there's a lot of spills and crashes. And okay, so let's just talk about when this happens. Okay, so let's talk about my daughter since she's a little bit younger. My son, I guess, has grown out of this a little bit. But okay, my daughter Ruby, if she's running around and she trips and falls and face plants, and this happened the other night. We were having a little picnic out in the yard and out in our backyard, and she's running around and she just bit it. I mean, her hands were behind her back when her face hit the ground. She bit it pretty bad. So here's what she does, right? She falls down, and me as a attentive father, and I'm kind of like, I'm anxious dad over here. I'm looking at her, and what I want to do, what my urge is, okay, is to run up and freak out and go make sure she's okay. Okay, and that's a pretty natural thing to do. But I remember my general psychology course or developmental psychology course, and I stay seated because here's what my daughter does, right? She lifts her face out of the grass and she looks over at me. And what she's doing is something called social referencing, right? And she's saying, what she's really doing without words is she's saying, Dad, how bad was it? Okay. Now she knows that it was a little bit scary, but she's looking to me to say, how scary is it? Now there's two responses that I could have that would be really problematic. Okay. One would be to be neglectful, okay, to not even be checked in with her at all. Or perhaps, she gets up and she's crying and I say, oh, suck it up, quit crying. It's not that big a deal. And what's troubling about this, right, is that she's even more scared because she's saying it's bad and Dad doesn't know that it's bad. I'm really scared and he doesn't know that I'm scared. And what that means is that Dad isn't going to be of any help to me, right? Like he's not clued into how serious things are. So her anxiety goes through the roof. Now, the other thing that I could do that would be unhelpful is to the moment that she face plants in the grass for me to have a big gasp and sprint over to her and say, oh my gosh, are you okay? Because here's what's going to happen. Her head's going to pop up out of the grass and she's going to look at me and say without words, Dad, how bad is it? And what she's going to see right now on my face is, it is so bad. Like you might die. Okay, and so anxiety goes through the roof. But here's what she does, right? She looks at me and I let her know that I'm looking at her. I'm checking in, and I see her and I see that something scary's just happened, but my face is fairly flat. And then what happens is she looks at me and she says, okay, Dad's not too sure either. So let me check in. My face kind of hurts. That was a little scary. I got a little bit of wind knocked out of me. I'm okay though. And she gets up and she starts moving. Now, other times, okay, what happens is that she face plants and she starts crying quick and really hard. And so I know that she really hurt herself. But my role as a parent, right, is to be there, to be attuned, to see her, to see how scary it is for her, how bad she's hurting, but to not participate in it or to be too impressed by her fear or by her pain. And we're gonna get to that in a minute. Being unimpressed by fear. So we're gonna talk about that. So look, there's this middle ground where we're attuned, we're really checked in with somebody who's a little bit scared or hurting, but we're also not freaking out ourselves or playing into what can be a kind of performative anxiety or pain. Okay, and that's our sweet spot, because what happens there is that my daughter can really deal with the reality of her face plant. If it's really bad, she can deal with it, and I'll help her with it. But if it's not that bad, she can also figure that out on her own and sort it out and manage the challenge that is actually in front of her, rather than some boogeyman in the closet. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Of course, if there's questions, I want y'all to type those into the chat window. So, as clinicians, okay, we are not our clients' parents by any means,
but there is something about that thing of seeing your kid face plant that is, and how you can respond in a helpful way. There's something about that that translates into how we conduct ourselves as clinicians. Our clients come in particular, are more, to use an old-fangled word, are more neurotic clients, right? Who are they're more prone to negative emotion, and maybe even particularly anxiety. They come in and they're very frightened about things. Okay, and you can imagine that in a time of something like a pandemic, things can get pretty wild. I had one, and this, of course, this offers no identifying information about a client, but I had one client tell me, this is right after things got kind of wild and everything shut down and people started being quarantined. I asked him, well, how are you doing? And he says, well, kind of feels like everybody else lives in my world now, which I thought that was a kind of clever way to state it. But the world seems incredibly scary to him kind of all the time. And now everybody else is kind of getting on board with, yes, the world really is quite scary. So our clients come in with their anxieties, with their fears, and things feel pretty terrifying to them. Now, okay, we can't minimize it, right? We can't do the Bob Newhart thing of stop it, quit doing that, or suck it up, or you just need to chill out. If you've ever told that to somebody who's really anxious, you tell them that they just need to chill out. I don't know about you all. I've never seen that be particularly effective. If you have figured out a way to make that be effective, will you please let me know? Because that seems like a real quick and easy way to make things work, and I could really help out my clients. I kind of doubt that I'm going to get a response on that. It generally is unhelpful. So I don't want to minimize, right? But I also don't want to freak out with my client, or to have them kind of socially reference and look to me as their therapist, and they say, again, sometimes without words, how bad is it? How bad are things right now? And of course, this is what we want our clients to see when they look at us and they're trying to get some information from it. How bad is it? What we want them to see is that we are attuned, that we see that they're going through something painful or something scary, but also that we are unimpressed by their fears. We care. We're there with them. We're present. We're listening. We're not minimizing. We're not judging. We're not doing anything. But we're not impressed. Now, when I'm using this term unimpressed, I want to just quickly reference this book. Okay, if you do any parent coaching, parent consultation, you work with children and adolescents, and sometimes you talk with parents. This book, Children the Challenge, Rudolf Dreikers, this is an absolute classic. When was this published, Lynn? Like 1950s, maybe? Okay, so it's an oldie, and there's all these little case studies in here, fake, like hypothetical cases, and all the kids are named like Marla, and all these like very Leave It to Beaverish names. It's kind of humorous, and there's a whole chapter on what to do when the kids are listening to the radio too much. And it's not how do you get them off their iPhone. It's how do you get them to quit listening to radio shows, or maybe it's tube television or something. But so very old-fangled. But look, the principles. It's absolute gold. I use this as a clinician, but I also use this as a parent. It has been an absolute lifesaver with my kids. I swear I enjoy my kids twice as much as I would if I had never had this book. Amazing book. But one of the chapters in this book is called "Be Unimpressed by Fears." And it's talking about this in a parenting situation. But I'm going to read you just one paragraph from it, and then we'll talk about how it plays out in a non-parenting situation, just for us as clinicians with clients. So here's what it says. It is necessary to teach children caution in potentially dangerous situations, but caution and fear are distinctly different. The first is a reasonable and courageous recognition of possible dangers, while the second is a discouraged and paralyzing withdrawal.
Naturally, we must teach our children to use caution in crossing the streets, never to accept attention from strangers, that guns are lethal weapons and not toys, that swimming must be only done in depths comparable to skill. All this can be taught without instilling fear. It is a matter of learning limitations, learning how to take care of situations which appear difficult or dangerous. Fear saps courage. Fear is dangerous. For children, it serves a purpose. And there's a whole explanation behind that if you read the whole chapter. If parents do not respond to fears, their children will not develop them, and parents and children alike will be free from the resulting torture and suffering. And the idea of this, right, is that fears, anxiety, here's what I want us to do. I want us to think of anxiety as kind of a baseline emotion, okay? And then I want us to recognize that anxiety can flesh itself out in one of two directions, okay? And to use an Adlerian term, one way in which it can go is to the useless side of life. And when we say useless, okay, of course, we're not calling people useless. We're not saying that. But we're saying that their actions are not useful both for themselves and for the people around them, for their community. They can move in the useless side of life, and that would be fear, where they get paralyzed and they don't manage challenges at all. They're just frightened, but they can't do anything, right? They just sit there feeling terrible and feeling anxious. Now, anxiety can also go in a different direction, and that's in the direction of caution, which is to say, well, what is it that I can do? And let me do that and keep moving. Okay, so it's not paralytic. So you come upon a rattlesnake in the trail. Okay, so what fear does is it says, oh my gosh, it's a rattlesnake, it's a rattlesnake, it's a rattlesnake. I hate rattlesnakes. Rattlesnakes can bite you. And what if I get bit? If I get bit, then who's going to hear me out here? I'm all alone. I'm 3 miles into my hike. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And you just stand there, right? Anxiety can also move towards caution, where it could say, oh my gosh, there's a rattlesnake. Oh my God, this is a little scary. Now, here are my options. I can turn around. That would be one option. I'm a few miles in. I've had a nice day. There's maybe another spur trail that I could go on, still get a good hike in. Well, I could smack the thing in the head with this big stick that I have behind me, and maybe I could kill it. I could shove it off with the big stick and let it go its own way, or I could take a really wide berth around the snake. What would I like to do? And then you choose and you go do it. You see, and so the threat is neutralized and dealt with. It's managed. It's not just left there sitting there while you don't move and you're paralyzed. And sometimes what we can do as therapists, right, is that if we get impressed with our clients' fears, we say, oh my gosh, that's so scary. Well, one of the things that we can do is we can give them a message of, oh my gosh, you're right, you can't handle it. The challenge is so big that you can't handle it. There's really nothing that you could do. And so probably just doing nothing is your best bet. Just stay there, paralyzed, don't move. It's going to be, just wait it out. We'll, hope and pray that things work out for you. And of course, this is a really discouraging message to give. And this is why we want to have a flat face, right? When my daughter Ruby face plants, okay? I want to have a flat face, not to say I don't care, but it's to say, well, what do you think you need to do right now? What do you need to do right now? What it's communicating to her is, you can handle it. If I get up and I sprint over to her, what I'm communicating is, oh my gosh, this is so scary and you could never handle it. And so I have to handle it for you. So what we're looking at, right, is that anxiety can move in such a direction that it kind of serves as an excuse to free us of the responsibility of the tasks of life. And I'm not saying that in some kind of like lazy, I'm not like saying in some, let's condemn lazy millennials that's not it at all. Okay. I want to escape the heavy responsibilities of life. You want to escape the heavy responsibilities. We all want that on some level. Okay. But courage is what moves us past that and says, yeah, it would be nice to be free of it, but I can't be free of it. I'm alive and life comes with some responsibilities.
to work, to do something with myself, to get along with other people, to develop some particularly meaningful relationships. These are Adler's 3 life tasks of work. There's a social task and a love task. We're not free of those responsibilities. We're just not. But fear can make us say, oh, I would attend to those if only I weren't so scared. Okay. And then we sometimes as therapists, we can validate that feeling or that thought by saying, oh my gosh, yeah, it is so scary. I mean, you could never, and this is not maybe what we mean to communicate, but we need to be tuned into that possibility. Okay. So to summarize, fear, it's a discouraged response. It paralyzes us, but it also insists that a big problem exists and we can't do anything about it. So that's that, oh my gosh, it's a rattlesnake. Rattlesnakes they bite you. And if I get bit out here, I'm going to, my leg's going to get amputated or I'm going to die. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. But no movement in any direction. See, caution it's an encouraged response to we put anxiety to a useful end, where it motivates us to do what we can, which is maybe isn't everything, but we do what we can to solve or improve, to solve a problem or improve the situation, and it allows us to keep moving along, imperfectly, but we get to keep moving along, attending to the tasks of life. So here's the deal with a pandemic. Okay, we're looking at this thing, and if we just consider, okay, what can we as individuals do? Can we solve this problem? No. Okay, I can't solve a global pandemic. I can't do it. Okay, now that's not to say that I can't do anything. Okay, there are some things that I can do. I can maintain at least 6 feet between me and other people who aren't living in my household. Okay. I can wash my hands, and I can wash my hands quite regularly. I can really work on not touching my face, which probably you guys have seen me touch my face like 15 times today during the webinar. But I can work on touching my face at least less. Okay, I can not have a raging kegger in my backyard with 150 people. As awesome as that would be, and as much as some of us might be craving that kind of an experience right now, I can choose not to do that. And does it solve the problem? No. But it's my contribution to improvement in the situation. Okay, now these are things that I can do. I cannot solve a pandemic. And so if what I do is I focus on how frightening the pandemic is, oh my gosh, this is just so scary. And look how many people it's killing. I mean, it's killed this many people today, and it killed this many people yesterday. And that means that today's death count is higher than yesterday's. And oh my gosh, isn't that terrible? And these are the things that we're dwelling on. Well, what we're doing, right, is we're looking at a problem that we can't solve, and we're deciding that it's a problem that we have to solve because we're giving all of our attention to it. And so we're caught in this really, I mean, it's like a catch-22, right? It's you have to solve it, but you can't. But you have to solve it, but you can't. But you have to solve it, but you can't. And that's all of where we live. So here comes a little insight from my professor from Furman, Paul Rasmussen. It's a really great short interview that I found with him. Maybe I'll post this. Once we post it online, I'll include the link to it. Maybe we can send it out with the evals too, and we can do that. Just a little YouTube video of him being interviewed about emotions. And he says something really interesting in this short interview about anxiety. He says, okay, anxiety is the emotion that causes us to pay attention to the fact, oh, there's a problem. Something's not right. Okay, maybe it's a threat, maybe it's a problem, but here are our choices of what we can do with anxiety. Okay, we can fix the problem, or we can decide that it's a problem that we don't have to, or that we can't solve. And those are our choices. Or what we can do is hang out in the middle, okay, and say, it's a huge, really important problem that I have to solve, and I can't. And that's really where we get paralyzed, right? And we start
it starts becoming pathological. We move out of caution and into fear. We move away from the useful side of life to the useless side of life, and we're really doing no good for ourselves, right? And in fact, of course, now we know enough about what anxiety does to us physiologically that, of course, when we're freaking out all the time, we are really compromising our immune system's ability to fight off infections, including viral infections. So, in fact, by worrying about things that we can't improve upon, we are making ourselves more vulnerable to the threat that's out there. In the same way that if you just stand there frozen, you're probably more likely to get bit by the snake than if you got to move on in one direction or another, smacking the thing with a stick or shoving it off the path or taking a wide berth or turning around. Those are much safer things to do. So here's what we want to do with clients when they're coming in with an enormous amount of fear, not just anxiety, but fear about this pandemic. For one, we need to do our best to not be impressed. Okay, and again, that's not to be uncaring. It's not minimizing. It's not invalidating our clients' experiences at all. But it's also not joining in and participating and having a way of accommodating them. That this is unhelpful. Now we have oodles of research showing that the accommodation of anxiety is a major contributing factor, and what we now see is this epidemic of anxiety. Really cool study. I just want to mention this briefly. This isn't pandemic focused, but this is so cool. Yale University ran this study a couple years ago. So what they do is they have all these young people, I think somewhere around the age of 12, somewhere 12 to 14, something like that. Children who had been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. Now they split them into two groups. One group gets CBT, which this is our or for a lot of folks is like mainline, very seen as evidence-based treatment of choice, right? So they get CBT, and then this group over here, the kids get no treatment at all, not one bit of treatment. But what they do is that they pull the parents of these children into a program where all they do is they teach them not to accommodate their children's anxieties, not to be uncaring, not to be invalidating, not to say suck it up, but not to accommodate their children's anxieties. So then, they play those things out, and then they see after, I forget the amount of time, maybe 12 weeks, 15 weeks, something like that. So they look at the outcomes. Literally no difference in outcomes. None at all. And what this, of course, tells us, right, is, this is encouraging at a lot of levels. CBT tends to be a pretty effective treatment, but it also demands a fairly motivated client. So I don't know if y'all have ever tried to do CBT with somebody who really is not motivated to participate. It doesn't tend to go very well. So it's really encouraging that part of what we can do, at least for children and adolescents, is teach their parents not to accommodate, and they get just as much benefit. So we need to think about this as therapists too. How often do we accommodate our clients' anxieties? And not just their anxieties, but their fears, right? That bit on the useless side of life where they, not consciously, I'm not saying that they're being insidious or malicious in this way, but that they are withdrawing from the responsibilities of life, from the tasks of life, because they say, I would do that if only I weren't so scared. If only I weren't so anxious, I would, X, Y, and Z. Now, of course, a whole other thing to say, I'm trying to be cautious. This is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to be cautious. I'm taking some steps because that's how I can contribute, not just to my own well-being, to keep myself healthy, but also to the well-being of those around me. And of course, this is Adler's sense of social interest, right? Our sense, a communal feeling that we belong to a group of people, and therefore the well-being of the group is intricately tied to our well-being, and vice versa. That if we do well, then the group does well, and if the group does well, then we do well in the long term. So, a lot of concepts here. What I'm trying to say is this: to sum it up, there is plenty to be anxious about right now, and it's appropriate that there's anxiety out there. What we need
to have eyes for as clinicians is whether our clients' anxieties or even our own, right? I mean, we could think about this for ourselves too. Is our anxiety moving toward the useless side of life where we're fearful, we're paralyzed, where all of our attention is oriented towards things that we cannot fix? We have no impact on it whatsoever. Or is our anxiety moving in the direction of caution where we're saying, I feel a little tickle in my throat from allergies, which I don't know if any of y'all are having allergy problems, and then you're like on your weekly grocery store run or whatever, and you feel the tickle in your throat and say, "Oh no, everyone's gonna think that I'm that I have the Rona." To do the vampire thing, to say I have a tickle in my throat, and I'm going to make sure that I get as far away from other people as I can, and then I cough into my sleeve. I don't know if you guys get it, that I can cough into my sleeve, and I'm going to wash my hands, and maybe I'm going to wear my face mask, and these are things that I'm going to do, but I'm not going to withdraw from the tasks of life that are in front of me, and I'm also not going to decide that I have to fix a problem that I can't possibly fix. We need to have eyes for that and make sure that we as clinicians call that out, that we let our clients know what they're up to, that we encourage caution, that we empathize with fear, but also let them know, hey, that's not the only way that anxiety can manifest itself. What would caution look like? What would it look like for you to be, what steps could you take to contribute to improvement or a solution? Maybe you can't solve the whole thing. What could you do to be helpful to yourself and to the people around you? That's that social interest. And the answer is not nothing, right? And what you're saying is, what movement can you make? What is it that you can do? Oh, that's something you can do. You can do it. That might be a little bit scary. Okay. Couple final words, and then I'm gonna try and leave a good bit of time for Q&A and for just for some discussion. I want to make this is something I feel very, very strongly about. We as individuals, and sometimes we as a culture or as a society, and really even maybe we as a profession, as helping professionals, we tend to have this idea that the solution to anxiety is safety. And I think that is dead wrong. And I want to be clear, this is not my opinion, and I'm not trying to be some like machismo tough guy or something. It has nothing to do with that. This is what scientific evidence tends to show us, that safety is not the solution to anxiety or fear. Now, I also don't want to say that it has nothing to do with it, right? It's not that safety is unimportant. I want my children not to play in the street where cars drive by at 35 miles an hour. I want them to be safe. I do want that. And of course, if that's the only place that they could play, it's likely that they would not flourish, right? I mean, life would get pretty scary. And I go out my backyard and I get rid of all the fire ant piles because I don't like it when my kids step in fire ant piles. But look, at the end of the day, the solution to anxiety is not safety. It's courage. This is a really important distinction. Okay, we live in a world where there are threats, and there are threats that some of them are our fault. Okay, if I'm driving like a maniac, okay, there are threats that are out there that maybe I'm going to get in a car wreck because I'm driving like a maniac. But then there are things like this virus and this illness that it's not our fault. It has nothing to do with a choice that we made. It's just kind of entropy. It's just things can kind of go to crap sometimes. And to say the only way to be anxiety free is to be safe, what that means is that we're going to be chronically anxious because there are just lots of threats. Okay, and on top of that, we have some real, very real evolutionary reasons for this, but we have a bias to pick up on threats.
Okay, and this is a good idea. Okay, if I'm out in some Alaskan wilderness, okay, and it's the middle of summer and there are wildflowers, and there's a butterfly here and there's a fox, frolicking through the grass, and there's a babbling brook and there's a grizzly bear and there's berries over here. Okay, now the only thing that I as a human being am going to be paying attention to in that moment is the grizzly bear. And that's good, because if I don't see the butterfly, okay, I missed out on something. If I don't see the grizzly bear, I'm gonna die. Okay, so we have eyes that have been evolutionarily shaped to see threats. And so if what we're looking for is safety, we're going to be looking for a long time, really hard, and we're going to be really dissatisfied by the results. If, on the other hand, what we're looking for is courage, let's say married with some wisdom, okay, it's not just, foolhardy courage, but it's courage married with wisdom, that is a place where our anxiety is going to drift toward the side of caution and away from the side of fear. We're not going to be paralyzed. We're going to continue attending to the tasks of life. We're not going to be foolhardy. We're not going to be, my kids aren't going to be playing with a handgun and thinking that it's a toy. Okay, they're not going to be doing that. But they're also not going to be living in this cloistered, pillow pasted world where they get the message. The only way for things not to be utterly terrifying is for you to be perfectly safe, because then anytime they interact, they step in an ant pile and their whole world dissolves, right? Where it's like, I've stepped in an ant pile and it's really painful, and I still have legs and I'm still here breathing, and my kids now, they've stepped in a bunch of ant piles and they still have legs and they're still here and they're still breathing, and we're okay. And we can move through life in a way that is courageous. And there's a good quote, and I'm going to butcher it. So and I can't even give credit where credit's due. So I apologize for doing this. But there's a good saying that courage is not the absence of fear, but a conviction to act in spite of it. And that is that's something that's real. That's real for us as individuals, and it's real for us as clients. As clients are doing all kinds of things, every bit of change that we're asking of our clients, or that we're inviting our clients to make, it's scary, and it's cumbersome, and it's fraught with threats. That those are real things, but we can give them the message: hey, it will be hard, and you can do it. This is kind of scary, and you can make your way through it. This pandemic, it is pretty wild. How would you like to make your way through it? What kind of precautions could you take that would be reasonable and attentive to the things that you really can affect? Not that will solve the global pandemic, because that's just not going to happen. But what could you do to lend a hand to contribute to some improvement and to a solution, to do your part? So that's kind of what we're dealing with theoretically, and some thoughts that have come up for us as we've been seeing clients and thinking even for ourselves about how do we want to interact with this. And well, I guess one last thing. Alfred Adler said that the chief danger in life is taking too many precautions. And I think I think about that quote a lot, and it seems like one of those quotes that you can drill down into it, and the more you think about it, the more complicated, and I mean that in a good way, the more complicated it becomes. But just to recognize that actually taking too many precautions becomes incredibly dangerous. That actually is the most dangerous thing in life, is to just continue insulating yourself and drifting over to the side of fear rather than caution. Okay, so I think I've said enough. We've got about 15 minutes here for Q&A. Would love, it can be about this topic. It also, if you just have a general question about something, I'll be happy to answer those things. I really, really like Q&A. So anything that you'll want to ask, go ahead and put it. And there is a little bit of a delay, so excuse the awkwardness for the next 15 minutes where there might be some delay. Frank, I'm seeing your introduction. It's really good to it's really good to have you with us. Lindsay, you can ask questions too. But only if you write them on the whiteboard. You can't have an advantage over people. They're going to type it out. You have to write it out. Okay, from Kevin. Can you and Lindsay talk on screen about the risks you took with going into private practice from a steady paycheck, etc.? Yes. Talk about something that's anxiety producing and was a real threat. Okay, and it is true. I mean, so we were working for the state, so it's not like we were making buku bucks. Okay, we didn't give up some swanky 6-figure salary or something. Look, actually, I think this really applies to what we're talking about today. Here's what we did. We both had anxiety about leaving a steady salaried paycheck with benefits and sick days, and I mean, like all those things. It was anxiety producing, and if we're honest, Lindsay, let's be honest. For several years, we drifted to the useless side of life, and we were just afraid, and we were paralyzed, and so we hung out in a job. And I'm not trying to speak ill of the Department of Mental Health at all. It was just these were not jobs that were tailor-made for us. Okay, they were not jobs that we enjoyed. By and large, of course, there were things about it that we liked. But by and large, it was not a good fit for us. But we were paralyzed, okay? And so what we're doing is we're saying, there are these threats out there, and there's nothing we can do about them. And oh my gosh, it's so scary, and we're so unhappy how we are. And so we're just sit in this, that's being frozen with the rattlesnake on the trail. Okay. Eventually, at least for me, and I can't speak for Lindsay, but a friend of mine really encouraged me, and really what he said was, you can do this. Yeah, there are some things that can be kind of scary or whatever, but you can do this. So what happened is I moved from a discouraged place to a more encouraged place, but we took precautions. And so what we decided to do is we started seeing clients in the evenings. We shared one office. We split up, Tuesdays I'll see clients, Thursdays you'll see clients, or what. We split it up that way, and we started to build a caseload. And we crunched some numbers, and we sorted some things out. And so we didn't just, quit, and we had no clients, and well, let's, what should our business be called or something like that. We did a lot of prep work, but it was cautious. It wasn't fearful. And so then we, we were maybe each seeing 6-7 clients a week, something like that. And it got to this point where it's like, we're already busting we're working a lot of hours, and if we do any more, we're going to burn out. We'd saved up, or at least for me and my wife, we'd saved up all the extra money that I've been making through the private practice to allow me some room to float. And again, that's caution, right? That's attending to the possible threat of financial ruin. And so we did what we could to help things out. And then we launched, and it was scary. And I think I speak for both of us when I say that we are so glad that we got our butts moving and made that scary but really necessary choice. We love being in private practice. It's allowed us to do so many fun things. And so anyways, great question, and wow, that just fits super well. Brittany, you say, how do we as clinicians manage our own emotions of anxiety while also being emotive leaders for our clients? Asking for a friend, please give me a break. Of course, you're asking for a friend. Well, a couple things. So this is as much a message for us as it is for our clients. So what I do when I'm anxious is I go through a little process. I can feel it, and for me, I get that kind of like ginger ale in the tummy feeling, and for some reason my hands tingle. And I often get a little pressure band across my forehead. And so when those things are happening, I know, okay, I'm a little anxious. And what I do is I slow down and I say, okay, what threat is my anxiety trying to get me to pay attention to right now? And if, when we say threats, it's not always like, somebody trying to break in my house. Or most of the time it's psychosocial
stuff. I'm scared that I'm going to look like an idiot on tonight's webinar. Okay, and if y'all want to know the truth, I was anxious all day about this webinar because I felt like I hadn't quite organized my thoughts like I wanted. Okay, I think I'm going to look like an idiot on this webinar. Okay, so the next question is this. Well, can I have an impact on that threat? Is there a possibility for me to at least incrementally neutralize that threat? Is there something I can do to make it better? And the answer today was, well, yeah. You've got this free hour in your schedule. Sit down, put some things on paper. So I did that, okay? But sometimes the answer is no, okay? And if the answer is no, there's nothing you can do about it, Calvin. If you've prepared as much as you're going to prepare, and maybe you're going to look like an idiot anyways. Okay. Well, then what I do is I say, okay, I'm going to come to a decision that this is not a problem that I can or need to attend to right now. And I start talking to myself. There's a preacher named Martin Lloyd-Jones, and he said that people listen to themselves too much and don't talk to themselves enough. And there's something about that that's psychologically true, that sometimes we need to put a little feedback back into our brain, not just allow it to, work on its own, for its own devices. And then the last bit is this, that if I can think it out, right? Sometimes you can see what's logical, but your body's not on the same page, right? And you don't feel like doing it. One of the really cool things about being a human being is that we can do things that we don't feel like doing. We can act as if something else is true. So if you're concerned, you say, okay, I know that going to my office where there's nobody else and I'm going to stay 6 feet away from people and whatever else, I know that is reasonably safe, not perfectly safe, but that's reasonably safe. I'm terrified about it. Okay. What we can do is to say, you know what, I'm going to act as if it's reasonably safe. I'm going to almost force my body to go and do what it doesn't feel like doing, but what I know is the right thing to do. And that's going to take some courage. So there's the courage piece, but I'm going to go do it. And that's, this is almost like Bessel van der Kolk stuff of getting your body involved in a healing process. So moving your body in such a way, acting as if something is true. And then what happens is that your body gets to experience it, right? Like you get to go home at the end of the day saying, wow, that was scary, but I went and I haven't died. Okay, so that's some of it too. I guess the other piece, right, is that there is something that we have to do with ourselves as clients where we need to put at the front of our behavior what it is that our client needs in that moment. Now, that's not to shut down our needs or ignore them. You've got to pay attention to them. You have to take those things and say, I have a need. I'm scared. I'm pretty afraid right now. I'm really anxious right now. But to set it to the side to be dealt with later, not to be swept under the rug and kept there, but to be set aside so that then when the session is over, you can say, okay, I just spent 50 minutes talking to my client, maintaining a calm disposition towards them when I was freaking out inside. Now I've got 10 minutes before my next client. And instead of writing my note, I'm going to be compassionate to myself. And I'm going to take 10 minutes to do some breathing exercise, to do progressive muscle relaxation, to do some mindfulness, meditation, whatever, stuff like that. Okay, I think I answered that enough. My concern, especially with the pandemic, I feel like I may be joining too much with my clients' fears right now, if that makes sense. Okay, here's what it might be. It might look like finding a way to talk less. And I'm like sinner, what's Paul's thing? Chief of sinners here with this, okay? I talk too much in my sessions. But sometimes when we find ourselves joining in with a client a little bit, sometimes what we can do is just we just don't say anything. Maybe we don't know what to say, right? What's the right thing to say? Maybe we see, I'm joining in a little bit. Maybe just say nothing. Or what you do, it's that good, like Carl Rogers, pure reflection. Wow, you're really anxious right now. This pandemic has really got you worked up. But you see, we're saying it calm, low tone of voice, empathetically, but we're not impressed. We're not saying, oh my gosh, that is why, you see, now I'm not empathizing. I'm joining in and participating.
Okay, so I think that's as much as I want to say on that, because I do see another question here. Can you please talk about parent coaching a little if there's time? Yes. Okay, so here's my thing about kids. I love kids. I love my kids. I love other people's kids. I hate being their therapist. It's just not for me. And I'm so thrilled that there are people who love being children's therapists. Like that there are people who they get amped to be doing play therapy. That sounds like death to me, but people love it, and I love that they love it, and I want them to go get their help. But so then, right? Sometimes what happens is that I've got somebody, they reach out to me, right, and they say, "Oh, could you see my 7-year-old son? He's struggling with X, Y, and Z." I tell them no, okay, because and not because I don't care, but because I will not be of the best help for that 7-year-old. I might be able to help a little bit, but it's they need to go somewhere else to get better help from somebody. But I always offer this. I say, one thing I do offer is that I'll meet with parents and talk about what's going on and see if I can help you guys sort out how you can be supportive and helpful. Now, I want to be very clear to make sure that I don't portray them as the source of the problem. Okay, every parent's really frightened about being a terrible parent, and sometimes we as therapists can give them that impression that, yeah, really, this is all your fault. And of course, that only discourages them and activates whatever defenses, or in Adlerian's terms, probably cause them to feel inferior, for which they're just going to compensate, right? They're going to engage in something that's really not helpful, both for them and probably also for their kid and their community. So then let's say I have parents come in. What I do is I ask them about their kid's behavior. I listen to them. I always want to give them the impression you guys care about your kid. I see that you love your kid. You're doing, I think, the very best that you guys know how with what you've got right now. And oh gosh, I'm going to ask you some more questions so I can really understand how it is that you're making choices about how to manage this misbehavior, or oh boy, you really are accommodating this your kid's anxiety. I'm not going to sit in judgment. What I'm going to spend my time doing, at least to start, is to see, I want that to make sense to me. I want to really understand, not just in general, but really in your story, what is it that causes it to be that you really have seen that this, for some reason, seems to be the best way to move forward, even if it's really not very fun for anybody. Once we get there, I've got a real rapport and relationship with them, right? Where they feel like it's not just that I see what's going on and maybe I have some knowledge, but also that I really understand why they're doing what they're doing currently. And in there, we can find some basic mistakes. Really, really great technique developed by Frank Walton, who actually is joining us here in the webinar. The most memorable observation technique. If you will contact me, I will give you really specific information about that technique that was passed down to me from Frank, and I think I have some other resources. Might even be able to find something from Frank. Super, super, super helpful in helping us work with parents. And it's just about, hey, what is it that you could do to contribute to the solution? Okay, it's not how can we fix your kid by getting you back in line, you sorry son of a gun. It's never that, but it's you're having a tough time with this. I don't want to give you the impression that there's nothing that you could do. Let's sort out what you could do, however small it might be. And often, the truth is, oftentimes it's not small. But that doesn't have to be blame, right? It's not, it's all me, it's my fault. It's here's something, it's encouraging. Here's something that you could do different that would have a real meaningful impact. You could really help. And parents tend to be pretty receptive to that. Honestly, a lot of what I end up doing with parents when I do parent coaching or consultation is helping them to not accommodate their kids' anxiety. Huge deal. And particularly right now, there's
if you've ever read, there's an Atlantic article and also a book called The Coddling of the American Mind. It is fantastic. Jonathan Haidt, who's been at the University of Virginia, and it's another school that he's at now. I think UPenn. He's taught at both institutions. Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff, I think is the other guy's name. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. The Atlantic article, you could read it online. The Coddling of the American Mind. It would be a great intro. Uses insights from CBT, and truth is there's a lot of Adlerian stuff in there that's just not called Adlerian, but a really interesting article. And that's a lot of what I end up doing with parents right now, simply because that's just kind of what's, sorry to put it this way, but kind of in vogue in terms of mental health concerns for children. Anxiety is what shows up a lot. So, okay. It is 8 o'clock. We just crushed that. If there's any final questions or meaningful feedback that we need to get right now, of course, feel free. You can type that in the chat window, or you can email me at Calvin, CALVIN, at travelersrestcounseling.com. You can also email my partner, Lindsay. It's LINDSAY, not EY, at travelersrestcounseling.com. We are always happy to solicit feedback and questions, or seeking advice. We love being helpful to other therapists. So if there's anything we can do, just shoot us an email. Like I said, all 4 of these webinars will get posted online for public consumption, you guys included. Please email Lindsay. She's going to send y'all evals. She already has. Fill those out. Send them back to her, and you'll get your CE certificate. Thank you guys so much. This is fun for me to do. I love thinking out loud, and this has been fun opportunities for me to do this. So thank you very much. Oh, and shoot us information in your emails about future webinar topics if there's something that you guys would like. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening.